And first thing we're going to do is minutes from the last meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes and thank Phil Hoppy for filling in so competently.
I will second and reiterate the thanks for our recorder, Phil Hobby.
I'm looking forward to you guys doing it in the future.
I would say also thank you, Phil, and I'm sure Gordon would like to thank you too.
Certainly would, because I wouldn't know.
And
Thank you,
so
Phil.
we are all in accord, and how about the orders through today?
I would like to start by saying thank you to Dave or whoever passed along to our lawn service folks for clearing the way to the helping the Hartland sign on the Hartland picture that we could actually visibly see it now, and I saw them out there with it. So thank you.
Anybody want to make a motion?
I move that we accept the invoices up to 8/16/21 as presented.
Anybody want to second that?
I will.
Gordon did. And any discussions, any questions about them? We do.
Dave, the auditors, is that a final payment or is that a partial payment to
That's partial payment.
roughly half, or do we know?
65, so they ran about 16,000 last year, so that would be a little bit less. I think we gave them an upfront too, so that's about halfway through.
And do you think the dust control, this is the last purchase this year for the season?
I think it really depends on the weather. I think that if we go back to having 3 weeks worth of rain, I think that we will be using less, but I think it really, I don't have an answer for you.
Yeah, of course.
I've got a question. Couple. What wall was fixed at Ogden Mills Road? What was that all about?
Yeah, so it's kind of a small road. Part of that is a town road that we plow, and the week of the 32 inches, we hit it. I think that it's, I've been there. There's a couple structures on that property, but I believe it is Thatcher's house in front of his, where the road kind of goes up straight. You can kind of pull into a driveway. Pretty sure we just hit it.
And then what was the work at Hartland Hill, the tree removal? Is that several trees or one tree?
2 trees. Yep. 3,500 for one and 1,500 for another.
Yeah, I saw that. That's why I was wondering. Okay, that's all I have. Anybody else questions? Okay. So I believe we're all in favor? All right, thank you. Motion's passed. Just go back on top. So any adjustments to the agenda?
Just working around Tom. You should probably make that a formal acknowledgement.
So the representative who's going to talk about the limited landfill agreement is late, and not surprisingly. I'm able to say that because it's my husband. So we are now going to switch and do him a little bit later after the Energy Committee. But first, we have a few minutes for public comments.
I missed the minutes part. I'll just say that the copy of the ordinance actually gets submitted with the minutes as well. So you'll have the minutes, and then you'll also have a copy of the ordinance in the book.
So do we have to sign that?
You signed the ordinance last
Right,
time.
but we don't have to sign the handbook, okay. So no public comments, so Sarah, would you be ready to talk?
Sorry, Sarah, you were all set up and
Well, I wasn't.
I told her that she needed to hold off for
Oh,
that RPC guy, but, well,
oh, oh.
did I mention the RPC guys yet?
Yeah,
Did I
oh,
say anything about
man.
the life they live over there somewhere? He's probably having a cocktail or something somewhere. You know, he's napping, I mean, got to wait, anyway.
Dave, is Sarah the chairman of the Energy Committee?
Okay.
Yes.
I did make a handout for you. I have 10 slides, and we don't really have an effective projection mechanism here. So I made a handout of the slides so that you could follow along and also have a record.
So these are different than the pictures? This is, what you're handing out is different from the pictures in the
In the
report?
report, 3 of them are from the report and the rest of them are not.
Okay.
Okay, I'd like to start by thanking you for the time on this evening's agenda. The Hartland Energy Committee appreciates the opportunity to open an ongoing conversation with the Selectboard and the town about current and future challenges of climate change. I want to cover 4 things, hopefully briefly. That's my intent. Our current situation with reference to energy and climate in Hartland, what Vermont is doing to mitigate the effects of climate change. I will cover a few graphs from the Energy Action Network's annual report to illustrate one of the core problems and some high impact pathways open to us right now to address the problem. And lastly, I want to talk a little about what Hartland needs to do to help Vermont reach the goals of the 2016 Comprehensive Energy Plan, also known as CEP. Then I'll do the best I can, answer your questions. If I don't know an answer, I'll try and find it for you and get it back to you. And I see both Carl Chemnitzer and the Energy Committee and Rob Andridge are here. And we've had a lot of conversations about energy and climate issues, so they may also be able to help answering questions. So I want to begin by thinking back to November 5th. November 5th, 1965. On that date, President Lyndon Johnson's scientific advisors informed him of an increase in the level of atmospheric CO2. In 1965, the CO2 level was 320 parts per million. The advisors were concerned because this was significantly higher than what had been seen as a maximum previously, based on ice core data, even preliminary ice core data back in the 1960s, that this was higher than the previous maximum of 300. And of course now we have much more ice core data, we can go further back. The advisors were also concerned specifically because CO2 was known as a greenhouse gas, and it's so called because it can absorb heat. Specifically, heat radiating back out into space overnight from the excess heat that was absorbed from sunlight by the Earth's surfaces during the day. So if you look at slide 2, and I've numbered the slides so that I can easily refer to them without being projecting them, and of course it looks very small. But what you can see here is this is parts per million CO2 in the atmosphere as a function of time, and it's going from present, which is on the right, back to 800,000 years. And you can see there's an up and down and up and down, and that relates to glacial and interglacial periods. But if you look all the way to the right, you'll see that the line, unfortunately not very dark on the printout, goes straight up at the end. And there's a little purple note there. And I believe that might be the 2019 average. But the key thing to note is what it says in red. August 2021, we are currently at 415.4 parts per million. And remember, the maximum over a long period of time was 300. This represents nearly a 40% increase compared to a century ago, and as well as hundreds of millennia going back in time. Over the same time, the average annual temperatures have increased over the entire globe. This change can be easily visualized in the graphics on slide 3. These were prepared last year by a climate scientist, Ed Hawkins, at the University of Reading in UK. They collected average annual temperatures from countries all over the world, and in some cases the states and provinces of large countries. They calculated an overall average temperature over the 125 years they were studying, 1895 to 2020. And then they compared each individual year's average temperature with the overall average. And blue indicates that the year was below the overall average, and red indicates the year was above the overall average. And I think it's very clear that there is a shift over this 125-year time frame from blue cooler to red warmer for both the United States, also other countries, and specifically for Vermont. Coming a little closer to home, slide 4 presents a summary of changes in Windsor County over the past 50 years, starting in about 1970 to 2018, almost 50 years. And on the left, you'll see the increases in average temperature, annual average temperature, annual precipitation, annual heavy precipitation. At this point, there has been no increase in the number of days over 95 degrees Fahrenheit. That would be the high for the day. But we have 8 fewer days below that don't stay below 32 as the high for the day. And the growing season has been extended by a few days. If we look at these numbers and without mitigation, and we project out to the end of the century, we're going to have more extreme heat, increased precipitation, including heavier precipitation, and the estimates are 24 days over 95 and 51 less days below freezing. The growing season will also be extended, and that sounds like a good thing, but you have to remember that there are negative consequences that come with that, including allergies, pests, insects, and vector-borne diseases, insect vector-borne diseases.
Would that be like,
Lyme.
yeah,
And also the tick burden on a lot of the wildlife,
yeah.
and the moose and everything. It's because they have and they don't get killed off over the winter because it's shortened and not as cold. So fortunately, in my opinion, Vermont is a bit ahead of many states, not so much in New England, but of the whole country, in terms of dealing with the challenges that we're facing. It was in 1998 that Vermont released its first comprehensive energy plan, abbreviated CEP, as I said. And this is summarized on slide 5. There are 3 on the left-hand side. There are 3 key provisions relative to what I'm talking about tonight on this, 1998 was the first one. It was updated in 2011 and then again in 2016. So the 2016 CEP is what we're dealing with right now. Key provisions: reduce greenhouse gas emissions 40% below 1990 levels by 2030 and 80 to 90% 1990 levels by 2050. In addition, meet energy needs from renewable sources 90% by 2050 and reduce total energy consumption, hopefully by at least a third by 2050. The CEP was in many ways aspirational, but last year the Vermont legislature passed, with bipartisan support, the Global Warming Solution Act in 2020. And one of the things this did was that it created a Vermont Climate Council. And a main charge for the Climate Council is to develop a climate action plan for the state. This is to be completed by December of this year. I have attended one or two Zoom meetings. I know they are well along their way and making progress on a very, very, very broad and difficult problem. Their purpose is to write a plan that specifies what Vermont will do, not try to do, but will do to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So we're going to focus on greenhouse gas emissions. And so the next slide, number 6, is from the Energy Action Report that I asked Dave to send to all of you. And I know it's a very lengthy report, so I'm going to focus on 3 slides. And the first one is slide number 6, and it really just shows greenhouse gas emissions over time. And from 1990 to the present, and that's about middle of the page, the slide. And then towards the right, in somewhat grayed out fashion, is a projection to 2050, with indications of where we need to be in 2025 and 2030 and 2050 by the Global Warming Solution Act. If we look just at the top line of the graph, we're going to see that greenhouse gas emissions in Vermont increased from 1990 until 2005. And of course, they start the graph at 1990 because the changes are supposed to be changes relative to the 1990 levels. So we actually increased our greenhouse gas emissions for the first 15 years, and we peaked just around 10 million metric tons of CO2 equivalents, or CO2e. And this is a unit that includes all greenhouse gases, not just CO2. So when you see CO2e, that's what that means. So it would include methane, nitrous oxide, water vapor, other greenhouse gases. The good news is that our emissions have decreased since 2005, but we've actually only gotten back down to the 1990 levels. The other really important thing that is illustrated in this slide is where are these greenhouse gases coming from? And down at the bottom, the portion in green indicates that the biggest source is transportation, which is really not surprising for a rural state because we don't all live close to each other. And this is basically all what is needed to get us from here to there and to get all the things we want to move from here to there. So all transportation. And that's the green. And then moving up, the orange section is thermal, which means building heating. And then as you move up further, somewhat smaller contributions are electricity generation in blue, agriculture in yellow, industrial processes in maroon, and waste management in gray. So what we have to do is we need to be getting to that grayed out portion on the right and reducing the total greenhouse gas emissions. So as we do that, as we work to that, we're going to get the greatest benefit if we focus on the 2 major sources, which are transportation and thermal. So the Energy Action Network goes on to analyze a lot of data from the state and from numerous other sources to come up with the 5 highest impact actions to reduce transportation greenhouse gases. And that's shown on slide 7. And reading from left to right, the 5 measures are electric vehicles, improved efficiency, et cetera, et cetera. So if you just look at each of the electric vehicles, it indicates, and it's a little light, so I'm just going to say that currently 2020, and this number is January 1, 2021, so it is through 2020. There are about 4,000 electric vehicles registered in the state of Vermont. But this needs to increase 30-fold by 2030. That's 9 years. We've got 9 years. Now, I know I'm going to add 1 within a year or 2, but a lot of other people. Secondly, some vehicles simply are not going to be able to convert, at least not right now. So another very important thing is improved efficiency, maybe a 10% improved miles per gallon. Thirdly, we got to drive less. Per capita vehicle miles per year needs to drop about 10%. And how are we going to do that? How are we going to drive less? We still need to get from here to there. So it is transit, difficult public transit in a rural area, but carpooling, that's one way. And the second way is telecommuting. And one thing we learned from the pandemic is that works. Doesn't work for everybody in every circumstance, but it works an awful lot of the time. And with money coming in from ARPA and the infrastructure to increase the broadband, this can only be more likely to work. So those are the 5 actions we have available now to work on this. If we look at the next slide, we have 5 highest impact measures to reduce building thermal. And the first one is heat pumps. So again, there are currently, and these data are statewide. I'll give you some numbers for Hartland specifically in a minute. We need to basically increase tenfold. It's 19K to 200, so 20 to 200 in 9 years. The number of heat pumps, electrically driven heat pumps that are using renewably sourced electricity. So that's the biggest impact. And then advanced wood heat also will help. But you need to almost, it looks like about a 2.5-fold increase in the next 9 years. The third item here is not applicable to Hartland. My understanding is that this is available, I believe, in the northwestern portion of the state. The fourth item is heat pump water heaters. And again, we're looking at a 20-fold increase. But the last item is the most interesting to me at all, and that's weatherization. And that's simply making sure that the buildings are as reasonably tight so that when you're heating them, or perhaps cooling them, but when you're heating them, you're only heating the interior part of the house. And you're not also heating just outside of the house. So weatherization is key. And it's only the fifth highest impact, but it has value added. Because if you don't weatherize the building, you're going to have to put in a bigger heat pump because it has to work harder. And so you're going to be using more electricity, more energy, and we're trying to reduce that. So there are 5 things to do for transportation, 5 things to do thermal.
Sarah,
Yes.
could I ask one quick question? I don't know what advanced wood heat means.
Well,
Pellets.
But it's not just pellets, I thought.
no, I think pellets, there are 2 things I see, is one, advanced wood heat, or there's another phrasing. But it's not just your old wood heat stove.
Right.
Okay, and that it's higher efficiency, you're getting more heat for the amount of fuel you put in.
Sarah, I can
Yeah,
answer
can you
that.
answer the question?
I
see
can,
this.
because we put in an efficient evaporator for our maple sap,
Yes.
and it puts the air in the right place in the combustion. And we went from lots of smoke to no smoke at all, and are you now burning about 65% as much wood as we used to do the same thing.
So it's the efficiency of the system, and it's some technology to somehow allow us to pull the most energy out of the source.
Thank you.
So those are 10 things that we can be doing. Now, how Vermont can do this as long as each town does its part, and each person, or at least each town, I should say. So what contribution does Hartland really need to make? And slide 9 shows some Hartland-specific targets for Vermont to reach the CEP goals. And these were prepared by Two Rivers Ottaquidgee Regional Commission. And these came to the Energy Committee when we were writing the Enhanced Energy Plan in 2019. And I moved them around from the way they presented them because I wanted to focus first on transportation and then on thermal. And so you'll notice that, so for Hartland, electric vehicles, we need to have 208 electric vehicles registered in Hartland by 2025. And then the number really jumps by 2035 and up to over 3,000 by 2050. And the same intermediate targets all the way to the 2050 goals are given. for both transportation and also thermal. Heat pumps, 145 heat pumps needed in Hartland by 2025 for Vermont to stay on track to its goals. Excuse me. And also about weatherization of buildings. And again, new efficient wood heat systems. And I did also add here the issue of electricity from renewable sources. Hartland currently generates about 20,000 megawatt hours a year between all the solar on various buildings or what have you and the hydro. So we already make 20, the number is 20, the unit is 100,000 megawatts. The thing is, we have to make more renewable electricity. And the goals are given here, again, for 25, 30, and 50. And if you look at the 51, it means we basically have to double what we do. And it seems to me that's going to come from solar. I think I'm correct, you might correct me if I'm wrong, that we're pretty maxed out on hydro. And big wind is not feasible, but I must admit, I think small wind and residential wind is maybe coming. So that would be very small things that wouldn't be obstruct views or anything. So the real question gets to, where is Hartland today? And I just have to be honest with you, and here I ran into a problem. Actually more like a wall. So slide 10 has several blanks, and I have not given up getting these numbers, and when I get them, I will send them on to all of you. I have identified 2 data sources. One is Two Rivers, Ottaquidgee Regional Commission, and the other one is the Energy Action Network's dashboard. It's called the Vermont Energy Dashboard. The problem is, on the 3 items, weatherization, heat pumps, and advanced wood heat systems, they don't agree. Now, I have some ideas in my head as to why they don't agree, and I'm in communication with both groups trying to straighten it all out so that I can actually tell you, as of a specific date, where Hartland was and where we were on the goal to 2025. But number of EVs is very simple. It comes from Department of Motor Vehicles, and both sources, Twin Rivers and the dashboard, agree. So we have 24, as of 12/31/19, we have 24 electric vehicles registered in Hartland, and that's only 12% of the goal to 2025. So we have a lot to do.
So that
And
was in
renewable
2019.
energy. Pardon?
In 2019, so that's,
We had 24 at the end of 2019.
So it
One of the
might
other
be more.
challenges is, and I think this is pandemic related, there is no, the data for 2020 is not available. One of them is coming up momentarily, so I should have it maybe within, I thought I was going to have it by last Friday, but I didn't get it.
So just to clarify,
yes.
is an electric vehicle 100% electric or is it hybrid?
I think they're really, these I believe are 100% full electric, not hybrid. And then also there is some data from Two Rivers only about how much additional renewable energy we've generated, and then we're only 29%. And so the problem is that we're not very far along. So to sum up, I want to ask a question. I want to ask the Select Board a question. And I'm not looking for an answer tonight. We can talk about it, but I'm not looking for an answer. This is what I'd like the ongoing discussion to be about. What can the Energy Committee do to help the Select Board ensure the energy future for Hartland? It has to be healthy. It has to be equitable. You may have noticed a lot more information on that in terms of the ENA report. It has to be renewable, sustainable, and economically viable. And it has to be for all residents. So the question is, the challenge is, we have some answers. What can we do to get it moving? Thank you.
Thank you. That was
yeah,
really,
that's great.
I know I took too long, but
no, you didn't. No, it was really good. Yeah.
thank you.
Thorough.
So let me see if you have some questions that I can answer, and if not, I'll write them down and try and figure it out. Or maybe Rob or Carl can help me, or anybody else that showed up.
Phil's got.
Phil?
Sarah, I was really struck with, well, first, thank you, and thank you to Carl, and to the rest of your committee members, which I know has been a dwindling committee, so I hope that's your charging it. I was really struck with the continued reference, whenever the pathway model was kind of laid out, to the disparity of incomes within the state.
Yeah.
And the report clearly pointed out that the amount of energy used by lower income folks wasn't necessarily a lot more or a lot less than higher income, but the percentage of income spent on that energy was grossly different.
Yeah, I think that I wanted to present that, but I didn't think I had time. I think in terms of transportation, not heating thermal, high income spend twice the amount of money on automobile fuel or truck or whatever.
Yeah.
But it represents only 2% of their
Yeah,
income.
something like
As opposed to low income, they spend half the amount of money, but it represents 10% of their income. And I think probably the same thing applies to heating. So this is the whole issue. The energy future, it's not just, oh, don't do this, don't do. We also have to think about the entire population of Hartland, including people that have high income as well as people that are at the low end of the scale. And there is a lot going on in terms of subsidizing. I was just on one meeting where in terms of the subsidizing for electric vehicles and where the subsidy should be targeted, and that it shouldn't be targeted in Burlington because it's high density population. Maybe in fact, and not just into a rural area, but it has to be targeted at certain families. And I do believe the state rebate or the state whatever it is for an electric vehicle, I think I saw, Carl, you might have these numbers in your head. Was it $2,500 for everybody but $4,000 for low income?
Yeah, there's a sliding scale.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't remember the numbers.
Yeah, there's a chart. In the
Yeah,
report.
so that's what they're trying to do because it is a huge difference.
Yeah. As you challenged us to think about what the Energy Committee could be doing, I hope we will
Yeah.
take that on. But there's also a distinction between the site versus the source pieces. And do you feel that as a select board we should just stick on the site side? Because we really
When you say
can't-
the site side, what exactly do you mean?
Well, the site side versus the source. I mean, we don't produce fuel for cars.
Where it's consumed as opposed to where it comes
Yeah.
from. Oh.
Well, we do have renewable sites.
Well, you
here.
do have some renewable sites, and also in Vermont generally, one of
Well,
the
when you're thinking
advantages is
about
wood.
transportation and you're thinking about thermal,
Yeah.
where does that energy come from?
Well, if wood heat, of course, is all internal to the economy of Vermont.
Yeah.
And so that's a real positive, and you may recall there were some very nice graphics about that, is trying to keep the money in Vermont. Even renewables with solar, and I guess our hydro, although I don't know as much about that, but in terms of our solar on buildings or wherever, or the 150 kilowatt arrays that are in Eastman Road and wherever, those were installed by probably Vermonters, working on those jobs, and they're maintained by Vermonters, and it's all within Vermont. I use Norwich Technology, they're in White River Junction, and most people use a local sources. So that's actually part of this issue of trying to keep the economic aspect of it. And I think you will see an awful lot of that also in the climate action plan for the state. Can't speak for them because I don't know all the details, but they are grappling with some of the biggest problems.
Carl,
Equity problems, what have you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Phil, you can attack that question in two ways. One is, some of you may have remembered that we entered the town buildings into the EPA portfolio manager, and the EPA portfolio manager does break out site and source energy, and they have a massive data bank so that they're able to actually predict where your energy is coming from by zip code. The second way is with life cycle analysis, and that gets pretty tedious. I've seen life cycle analysis for cars and for bicycles
Is that, no? Gordon?
I have some thoughts. They're not
It's okay.
necessarily a question, but my opinion is that we need a different mindset about how we go about this.
Okay.
And that doesn't seem to be coming through. I mean, I think way back to when I was in grade school, my teachers probably never failed a day without saying, you cannot have your cake and eat it too. And I can't help but think a lot of what is going on is trying to maintain that cake as we are eating it. And I read the newspaper, and it was about 2 weeks ago, there was a really good article about Hartford and all the things they're doing in Hartford. Talked about converting their fleet over to all electric vehicles and a number of different things, I think having to do with the buildings that the town owns, and similar to what we're trying to do. And somewhere near the end of the article, someone made the remark that this was going to be really good for the economy and for growth and development, which in my mind is completely backwards. I mean, they needed to say something about people learning to do with a little less and being more comfortable with their situation where they are, and not always aspiring for another car and another trip and another everything. And then I noticed in your report here, Hartland having by 2050 3,063 electric vehicles. I don't know how many people are going to be living in Hartland, but that's a lot of cars.
Yeah, it is, because right now there's about 3,500.
So what are we?
So I don't know what the
are we looking to do in
population-
Hartland here?
Yeah, that's a very good question.
Well, anyways, that's my remark.
That is a question I would have to address to Rivers, as to how do they come up with that 3,000 limit, but that's actually very good. I absolutely agree with you. We have to use less. I think one of the hardest things is for us to drop a total energy consumption by 33%. And that, it almost seems like an impossibility unless we change a lot of behavior, and that's very hard to change. But I don't think I don't know that technology alone is going to be sufficient, because technology always has sort of negative unintended consequences. And in fact, I think climate change is the negative unintended consequence of the Industrial Revolution. So we have to be careful to say, oh, technology is going to save us. We have to do with less, and that's going to be very hard to accept.
Yeah, one of my relatives tried to pin this climate change on our generation, and I said, no, this started back in the Industrial Revolution.
It does.
You know, this has just gone on and on, it's increased and increased, and now all of a sudden we're the generations that have to deal with it, but we did not start this problem.
No, we didn't start it. There was an interesting thing about that on NPR or something. But it does go back basically about 200 years, and we are now dealing with the consequences, and it's just accelerating.
Yeah.
And the problem is, you look at the estimate for Windsor County in 2100, and I don't think any of us want to leave that to our next generation.
No.
And so it's just, it is a bit mind-boggling, but I can't allow mind-bogglingness to say, oh, well, it's just too difficult, can't do it. There's got to be something that we have to at least work at.
Mm-hmm.
And the Energy Committee, I think, really wants to do it, but we're just not sure where to go.
So you don't have any suggestions for projects that you want to?
Oh, yeah, well, and momentarily, as soon as we get a site visit on the library, we'll have a proposal for you for what to do with the HVAC system.
Okay.
And,
Yeah.
you know, there's going to be a pro and a con. Which is going to be most expedient, which is going to be cheapest, and which one is maybe going to cost a little bit more, but 20 years down the road, it'll be payback. I think one of the biggest problems is that we're asking for short-term expense or short-term sacrifice for long-term gain or long-term benefit, and that doesn't sit well with a lot of people. That's very, very hard. So, but we do want to do that, and then Dave was going to try and fit in some information about, we did 3 energy audits on Damon Hall Rec Center and the library, just finished, and where we would go from there. But the library, to me, is handleable. It's not a historic building, and it's smaller, and it's not the best construction, but I think you can deal with it. Damon Hall is a huge challenge, and likewise the rec center. Curtis?
Hey, man. So I would like to propose, as Gordon did, a kind of mind shift. So throughout much of the history of discussion of climate change, it's been focused on individuals making changes, individuals doing things differently. We have this individual responsibility. We have to do this differently as individuals. That's one way of tackling the problem. And we just heard a different iteration of that with what you all were talking about. Project-specific things. We have this specific thing. How can we do that? How can we make changes? How can we increase the efficiency of this specific thing? But the other side of the coin for addressing climate change issues are these systematic issues that sort of pervade everywhere around us. We don't even think about them. We don't even know what's happening. And there's almost like an analog for that at the select board level, which is that instead of focusing on specific projects as they come up, we focus on policy that allows our administrative staff and our executive staff, like Dave, to appropriately plan and integrate in to their thinking changes that will systematically start to address the issue and help improve Hartland's contribution to the CEP or whatever you want to care about. So what could those policies look like? Our discussion could be, well, okay, the library, we have a HVAC system with this R level and an HVAC system with this R level. How many thousands of dollars is one R worth, right? That could be our discussion. Or we could be talking about things like setting out plans for the town fleet to switch over to electric. We could set goals as a town that by 2035 or 2040, our town fleet has switched over to electric in all instances where it's possible, right? We could set policy, something like for every project that we undertake in an existing building, an additional X% of the budget on that project needs to be spent on increasing weatherization or increasing the efficiency of that. So for instance, we're considering using ARPA funds or the block grant, no, not just ARPA, or the block grant funds for the elevator in the rec center. And if we as a select board had a policy that 10% of project costs should be spent mitigating the effects, the energy effects of this project or this building, then we would be committing as a town to, in addition to using that block grant money or using that ARPA money, we would be putting money in to improve the efficiency of the building. And that's one policy. We could make that choice once, and that's really clear guidance that people like Dave could incorporate into their planning for every single project going forward. And we wouldn't have to revisit every project. What are we going to do with it this time or for this project? So, like, those were a couple that I had thought of as I was literally just sitting here listening to Sarah, so I didn't put a bunch of thought into this. But a couple more would be something like pursuing or passing a policy that instructs the town to pursue net metering projects on town land, right? So solar net metering projects where we're trying to create our own electricity and then sell back whatever excess we have to the grid, and then we get that money as a town that we can then use. Or something like, we could even bring in, you know, the one of the key functions that we do is gathering taxes and levying and setting tax rates, as we've done recently. And possibly something we could do is looking at how we could use tax funds that are generated from improvements in weatherization. If someone puts in a heat pump, if someone switches their entire heating system over to heat pumps, they're putting a lot of value into their home. As it stands, the value of their home would increase, the amount of taxes they would pay would increase. So while that's probably a relatively small disincentive, it is still a disincentive, right? And as a town, we might be able to think about policy that would prevent that from being a disincentive to homeowners to do this switchover.
Can I just add something to that, Curtis?
Sure.
It is my experience, not my understanding, it's my personal experience, that the value of my geothermal heat system with full solar was not considered in the assessment of my house.
Then that's good.
So it didn't raise the
Right.
taxes. It does generate potentially a problem down the road if I want to sell it, but
So
right now.
I don't want to get stuck on a particular, as I said, these were just things that I sort of like came up with out of a lower part of my body while I was sitting here listening to Sarah talk. But I think the impetus that we could get from this conversation is, instead of thinking like, oh, for this project, how could we increase efficiency? Or, oh, for this building, how could we increase efficiency? But challenge ourselves to think really cleverly and creatively about what we could do at a policy level that would help mitigate these effects and bring us closer to the goals that we've stated and that have been passed into state law. So that would be my hope and my recommendation, and what I would hope that the Energy Committee could do for us is to produce either potential policies, potential regulations, or not regulations, but policies that we as a board could adopt for the town to follow, or could investigate ideas that we have as a board and see what the actual effects of those would be, like what the possible tax implications of this thing would be. Instead of saying like, oh, we want to know what the tax implications of this are, or of this thing is. Hey, Dave, can you assign someone to do that? Hey, Stacy, can you take time out of your lister's office? If the Energy Committee could serve as a source of expertise and a source of labor to help us explore the implications of possible policies that, if adopted systematically, would really help bring us closer to our goals, I think that would be a great thing.
Thank you. That is very interesting. We have to move on, but I really admire what you've put together. It's so thorough and so specific to Hartland that makes it interesting, more interesting than just some, local thing. Yeah, it's really, it gives us a lot to think about, Sarah, so I appreciate all of the work that you've done. It's very professional, it's really excellent.
I don't know, Dave, if I've completely consumed well beyond the time.
You've got about 3 more minutes, Sarah.
Oh, 3 more minutes.
Yes.
Well, maybe you could just take a 3-minute break. I'll leave that up to Dave.
So I do have a couple questions, however, they're the opposite of where Curtis is coming from. I am in the minutia. I would like to know how many bike racks are in town.
Well, how many bike racks? How many EV chargers? I know David's already said that you wanted information on that. Am I correct? You wanted advice on how many EV chargers?
Well,
in
because
town?
you know what we were talking about, if we switched the fleet, the town fleet, to electric vehicles, they'd have to have some place to
Yeah.
charge up. So that was,
Yeah.
that was a question. But bike racks I'm interested in specifically because I have an e-bike, Carl, finally. So I talked to Carl about it years ago.
I think there's 2,
And where are they? There's at the library
library and park and ride.
for bike racks.
Yeah,
So there's nothing here, right?
no, nothing here. I'm parked in the grass right
And did you lock it?
now. Now, Hartland's generally they are thinking about it, and with some of the money that's coming, the stimulus money, there should be some improvements to bike and ped infrastructure, but they need to be pushed on a little bit.
Thank you. The other thing I wanted to ask, Dave, I think you probably know this, where does the electricity that's generated in North Hartland Dam, that goes out of state, doesn't it? Does anybody know that?
Some of the electricity generated at Hartland, my understanding, does go out of state. Because I remember being very confused by something, and I said, well, where did it disappear to? And it's because it goes out of state.
But at the end
Am I
of the day, it
correct,
doesn't
Carl?
matter, right?
Well, we're talking about getting, we're talking about the percentage of electricity we want generated by by renewable sources for Heartland, and we got this dam right there, we could, you know, we could count that, but apparently we can't.
No, it's double counting if you count it. It's,
Oh.
I think it's a consortium in Boston owns North Hartland Dam. And there was also a consortium that owned the Peachy Mill Dam. However, that appears now to be owned by GMP. But either way, it's not electricity that we can count for our own use.
Okay, thank you.
Could I ask, Dave, maybe you know this from the ARPA details or seminars you've gone through, whatever. Can any of that funding be used on energy efficiency improvement?
To be determined.
I think that's something that, as you figure that out, I would love to have that information.
I've heard some people that say possibly. I read it as it has more to do with the kind of the clean water aspect of things, because it falls under that category the way it's written, but stay tuned.
All right, so thank you very much, Sarah, Rob,
Thank you,
Carl.
Sarah.
Really
The
appreciate
other
it.
piece on bicycles that I know Carl's been very involved with is pressuring the state to decrease the size of the traffic lane to allow the bicycle lane. I think that's something that almost like falls under general policy that we should be embracing that.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm not prepared to speak about it right now. Maybe I can come back and talk about it.
Please.
Yeah, there's some really good features there, and I noticed that V-Trans just released their new long-term bicycle plan, and in it, they, for all the time I've been on the Energy Committee, they've been recommending 3-foot shoulders outside white pot lanes, and in the latest plan, they opted for 4-foot.
Wow.
So they're headed in that direction.
Okay, great, thank you. So, we are now going to,
We need to do some of the energy reports, Mary.
energy reports?
The energy audits.
Oh, you want to, oh, right.
Second part of it, you might as well kill it unless you want to bring in Mr. Kennedy before he dozes off. We can, which will be fine. I think you can split the two up.
Okay, I forgot about those parts, actually. That was all supposed to be in the 45 minutes.
Yeah.
We are,
You said she had plenty of time left. I'm like,
yeah.
I don't know,
was-
Mary.
I think it was just, whoops.
we'll let it go. But it's
Okay,
okay.
who's going to talk about that?
I was going to go over it
Okay.
somewhat briefly.
So now we're going to talk about the Energy Action Network that we all received, their report.
No, that was,
No,
so
the
that was,
energy audits.
We just did.
Oh,
yep,
we didn't do the Energy Action Network.
she,
That was Sarah.
Okay. Energy audits.
not policy, but we have kind of hit on a little bit, Curtis, of what you've talked about if you're doing one thing, look at some of the other things. So back when, I don't know, Ariel and Laurel, and even when Rob took over as chair, there was discussion about what would be the next energy audits to kind of take on. And, I told them that most likely the two buildings that we're going to see work the next was going to be the rec center or Damon Hall. So those were the next two energy audits that were done. And, it may very well be that this fits in with the rec center. Again, it'll be kind of to be determined. You know, I think what you're talking about is we would do portions of it anyways. So the rec center certainly is worthy of discussion, as is Damon Hall. And as you look at this, there are some underlying features, you know, as to what we need to do and what we're seeing. So I'll just kind of hit real quick on the rec. I'm going to kind of hit quick on all of them, but in the rec center itself, the activity, the attic is kind of singled out. The need to insulate the attic is kind of singled out as a need, and as is the basement being uninsulated. That's, I think, me. So I highlight the basement at the rec center as being in need of insulation, and if you look at the Damon Hall one as well, you'll also see the basement is in need of insulation. I haven't really looked, I've looked a little bit as to what they recommend to take care of that, but I think it's important to note that one of the things that constantly comes up in my discussions with you is a need to take care of the drainage at the rec center and at Damon Hall. So you see a kind of symmetry there as to, you know, things that need to be done and perhaps can be done at the same time. Certainly I think that those two make a whole lot of sense. Windows and doors at the rec center is highlighted and certainly is and continues to be an issue, and I think that that's something that we can look at. And those three things, and I will, and I think that this came out briefly at the last meeting and the meeting before, now that we are not going to be able to do the steps to Damon Hall, is at both buildings, the lighting is in need of being switched over to LED lighting. I will notice, or will note that that's not only for the rec center in Damon Hall, but for the Four Corners Children's Daycare. The activity center is also in need of that as well. That is the rec center. Damon Hall, they made some recommendations, a couple of which may be indicated as being pricey, but if anybody takes a walk above or behind the stage, above the nature center, there is a room that is essentially uninsulated, and the windows even have, you know, cracks around them. They talk about insulating that. However, he mentions the need to ventilate that area in the building as well, which may push this to be price sensitive or maybe out of price range. But certainly, if you're going to look at things from an efficiency point of view, I think that that's probably one of the ones that comes up very high. When I asked him, particularly about Damon Hall, that was one of the first ones that came out of his mouth.
Okay, quick question. Is the heating system zoned so that it's being heated? Or, I mean, is it zoned so it's not being heated, or is everything being heated?
That room is not heated. However, you know, you've got, and the auditorium is not heated either, but obviously, you know, heat will kind of conjugate there, or to put it another way, that is a tremendous heat loss area. So that kind of just, you know, you've got the wide open stage, and it kind of, you know, can seep up and out that particular area. So it's a heat loss area, but that doesn't get heated, nor does the auditorium. You know, in the wintertime, unless it's used, and then, you know, obviously we're probably, as Sarah was saying, we're probably heating the outdoors a little bit in that case, along with the interior. They do mention the walls. Again, they mention price and the historic nature of the walls, and the need to take that into consideration. And you know, I would kind of echo that as well, both at the rec center and at Damon Hall as being, I don't think it's impossible to overcome, but certainly sensitive. Lastly, the energy audit. This is not the first time we have seen an energy audit of the library. Lastly, the library. Not the first time we've seen an energy audit of the library. We actually did one about 2 to 3 years ago. The output is very similar the need to insulate the the cathedral ceiling part of that, I think is the number one item. This does not give a price estimate. The last audit did. Again, it was on the expensive side, although in speaking with a member of the Energy Committee or two, it would come down to really kind of getting an idea of, the work to be done, the type of work to be done, and kind of playing with that, and essentially the price. Again, with any one of these, I think that I would I don't think I'm ready to just simply talk pricing with somebody just off the cuff on the 3 energy audits and say, hey, what are the different prices for doing this? I think another way to go is simply, and I've spoken to Tori over at Two Rivers, who's going to be handling our HUD grant with that project, that we do architectural or engineering work and have them tell us what they think is the more appropriate way to go, and then perhaps get a price estimate from that. So, that's it.
Yeah, and the report does highlight that there were, for the library, they mentioned 2 different types of insulation, and I assume those are 2 different costs. David, I find it interesting that the energy report reinforces what you have been saying for a while, is that we have real water management issues here that really need to be tackled first. Otherwise, insulation is going to be damaged and so on. So I don't have a comment there other than that's going to be a hard one to tackle.
I will just reiterate that not the library, but we did an engineering study of both the Damon Hall and the Rec Center, so I think they go together. There's a fair amount of overlap there, but I just think that at this point it gives you a good pathway to, move as we move forward with our priorities and what needs to be done to these buildings.
Okay, one thing I noticed on this library report, it's about the mechanical system, and it went so far as to say sometimes the heat and the air conditioning operate on the same day.
4 degrees.
Yeah,
And have a 4-degree difference between the 2 things. And this all gets back to my mindset thing. You could simply change those adjustments to maybe 8 degrees and save quite a lot of energy.
So I got to admit, there's some small things in here I'm not sure I agree with. In talking with Nancy, I'm not sure, I don't think we've ever seen that, so I'm not sure where they really came up with that.
Yeah, so maybe so, I don't know.
They talked about the broken windows over at the rec center, and we told them, they were going to be fixed in like 2 weeks, and they put it in there anyways, and we fixed it. And they talked about kind of the rotting wood over at the library as well, and, I've had 2 people look at that, and there's sheeting underneath, there's paper underneath that kind of, helps, it's not as bad as they say, yet it made it in there as, something that's
Photogenic.
hemorrhaging, and so I think that these are legitimate audits. I think that, overall I like their work, but there's a few things in here I thought were just a little bit of a sales job.
Well, would you mentioned that drainage and insulation need to be worked on in both buildings, but in that report, they mentioned bulk water as being a problem here. They didn't mention it over at the rec center, and bulk water startled me. Did you see that? I mean, it's quite a term.
So,
You think that was exaggerated?
if I can rewind the CATV tape to like 3 meetings ago, when I was talking about had I opened the door
Yeah.
over there, it would have, and ServPro just came and cleaned out the Lister's office. So
And they're expensive.
it is, it's a problem that we've got, particularly in the Lister's office, and mine as well. So, and over the rec center, it'll come through the wall.
Dave, do we have the elevation to a drain that is adequate for getting water away from this building?
So here we did some makeshift work in front, and it seems to have helped quite a bit. We essentially peeled away a couple layers of dirt and reseeded it. We actually put some fabric down underneath and then reseeded over it, and it's helping quite a bit. In places we do, and in places we don't. You know, I'm a little bit more familiar with the rec center. There's not, you know, for instance, in the back, it slopes straight perhaps, but you've got very little grass, and then you got a parking lot. So, you know, you need to implement the French drain system or something and have it, or I don't think the gutters will work too well, but, you know, we need to implement a system that's gonna go underneath the pavement and then out. There's actually some ditching there between the rec center and the neighbor.
The rec center's obviously got ground going away from it. What I'm thinking about this building is kind of sitting in a hole.
Right.
So I'm wondering is,
Yeah.
So my understanding is so we did a temporary fix over here. Most of our other problems actually is the cement around the building. And that being one of the more detrimental historic pieces of the building. I've had two people look at it and say that's gotta go to help this out. And then there's places in the back that, yes, you would need to make sure that it, you know, because with the cement, actually, it goes straight. And then it kind of, in places, goes down. So my understanding is that's a historic piece we need to adjust.
Mary,
Yes.
before we move on, I have an idea. And I think like this opportunity where we had this report presented that was really well done and communicated a lot of information, and we saw these energy audits. It would be, in my mind, it would be unfortunate almost to sort of let an opportunity like this go by without, you know, taking some sort of action or planning to take action. So I came up with something that I think should be palatable, and would really be helpful. So, under Dave's sage guidance, we have begun putting in contingency funding into the projects that we do for the town, right? So if we want to get a project done, to ensure that we get it done in the face of cost overruns or whatever it is, we put in this 10 to 15%, I think 15%, right, Dave, is the good number, the comfortable number.
So two different discussions a little bit.
For contingency funds for projects.
So the 15% comes from GASB, which is Governmental Accounting Standards, which basically states that you should keep 15% fund balance, which is just basically free cash on hand for those emergency situations that just arise.
Yeah.
I suppose that can be an emergency situation that just arises that, oops, we went 400 grand over on a project, which certainly can happen. Or it's kind of an oops, you know, a hurricane just ripped through town and we've got no funds anywhere to, you know, and we need to fix immediately.
So under Dave's guidance, we started building that into projects, like Three Corners intersection has a 15% contingency fund that we put into that project. And that's really great because it lets us get things done and we budget for it appropriately, right? So we've already budgeted for that money. So this would be, here is a suggestion I would offer. What about for projects that we do in town, any balance of the contingency fund is used on energy effect mitigation
For that project.
for that project. So we've already set this money aside. In order to even go forward with this project as a board, we had to commit to that contingency fund just to feel comfortable going forward with that project. So we've been responsible stewards. We've ensured that the project can get completed on time and the funds won't go to waste. And 5% is left over, right? So that 5%, we've already committed it to that project. So why don't we use it to make it even better by mitigating the effects of the energy of that project, of that building, of that whatever.
What does that mean?
So this is not a, I don't know what that means. What does that mean? Like, maybe at the library, let's say we have a shingle job at the library. We redo the roof on the library, right? So we put 15% contingency funding in there. At the end of the project, it went perfectly well. Everything was on time, on budget. We have this 15% left over. It gets invested into insulation, into the library attic.
Or possibly a fund for energy-related items at the library for that specific
Right.
building.
Yeah.
So we keep it in the circle of the intention of what we're doing. We're working on the library. But maybe from a flow perspective, a project management perspective, if
Save
we
that.
have money left over, we can't rip the wall off and add more insulation because that would be not prudent. But we save that money for the next round of work.
So I just throw out one huge caution. So for instance, like the three corners intersection or like a HUD project, so that bond, most of that's with bond money or grant money that's spent, just for that purpose.
Right.
So, it would need to be, essentially in my mind, almost, there may deviate a little bit in there somewhere. But it would need to be like a Hartland funded project that you
Yeah.
do that. Otherwise, I think you're gonna run into, pulling funds that you can't.
No, I think that's perfectly right. Like, I wanna.
Yeah, we both agree with you on
Yeah.
that. Just the
So
difficulty
what
of
is
the federal funds.
customarily done with leftover
That's a great
contingency funds?
What is customary?
I'll let you know when we have that problem.
That usually,
We have
doesn't
not.
usually happen.
I
We have
think,
that.
I think we now,
Generally speaking, the folks in the finance office would be hounding to get it back.
well, I think generally speaking, we haven't built contingency funds into our projects. So we're starting this new best practice that will enable us to do projects in a much better way and in a more responsible way of using the town's money. So while we're building in this best practice, we can also think creatively about how to leverage this best practice even more than we will already get out of it. And one of the things we could do is we could use it to mitigate the energy effects of that specific project.
I think it's an interesting idea. I just wonder in reality, what the effect of that, how many projects, how much money.
Well, I think, Mary, you're right. We're sitting here today, we don't know
Yeah.
the answer to your question.
Mhm.
But I think if we're looking to start somewhere, that this is the intent of our direction.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I just, I don't wanna think that this is, it's a baby step. That's how I put it.
Yeah, I think it's a, like,
Oh,
yeah.
oh, Rob,
What if you up your 15% to 20% and said on every project?
Wow,
you
Rob.
spend 5% on energy?
Even though I might agree with Rob, I'm not actually gonna go that far. I'm gonna say our 15% contingency is great, it's best practices, it's what
Yeah.
Dave's sage guidance is going to get us. And it would be awesome if we could also leverage that money to do something even better.
Well, another question would be, are there any other models in the state, that are using an approach like this where there's, I hate to use the word tax, but there is to implement this project and to meet the goals that need to be met by that have been laid out here, there should be an additional fee put on the building project to help us reduce the greenhouse emission gases. Is there any other models out there?
So I think you may want to,
I'm glad we're
you may
understanding.
very much want us to just simply get the building ordinance up and running before you start implementing a tax on
Yeah.
somebody wanting to.
Yeah, I don't think we should be, I think that's a possible arrow
I
in the
wouldn't want to
quiver.
be looking at town-wide would be looking at our municipal building.
I think that's a possible arrow in the quiver, Phil. But that's even a step further than what I'm proposing. What I'm proposing is nothing extra. It's nothing additional. We've already committed the funds to doing that project. We hope we don't ever have to use those funds. But in the interest of being responsible stewards, we took this step to make sure there was contingency funding. So once we have that funding, can we do something positive with it if there is any remaining left over?
So for example, let's say we decide to do something with North Hartland School, make it ADA accessible, but that would mean we wouldn't get any ADA grant money, right? Because if we did, then we couldn't do this.
Well, I think the particulars would be investigated in each situation, and I think they would be, like Dave highlighted earlier, I think in most cases, they would be pretty plainly obvious. Well, you can't do this with HUD block grant money because the HUD block grant doesn't say you can.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, how many of these projects do we do without grants? Are there any?
Well, didn't we just say we were fixing the rotten windowsills in one of the buildings, and we just went through a whole paint mitigation thing for lead paint? You know, those are all our monies. So
The library roof was another example.
So I think that, to be honest, I think some of this would need a little bit of legal guidance, because the voters have essentially voted that you're gonna spend $100,000 on a roof, okay? And you end up spending, over, again, it depends on where the budget shakes out at the end of the year. We've spoken a little bit about this, so essentially it goes into, again, that fund balance word, or what's called a surplus. Generally, it then takes voter approval to do something with that surplus. So I think that to say, we're gonna put, I think somewhere, it would need to be clear that, look, we're budgeting $100,000 for a roof, but if it happens to be 90, it's gonna go towards, energy efficiency or something like that. I'd have to kind of look into wording and how that might work. Otherwise you're kind of laying out a path. There's give and take. Certainly we have overtures and we have undertures. And it kind of goes to, other operating expenses and such. But it doesn't necessarily, unless we've specified, and I think that we did it in the budget with, $4,000 for HVAC system, or, the fire truck is specified that it's $60,000 going towards a fire equipment fund. It's clear to the voters that they're spending on $60,000. So I think it would need to kind of fall somewhere within that realm. So I'm not 100% sure whether it could or couldn't be done. I think it would just need some guidance.
So
The policy thing's a great idea. Maybe one of those other policy ideas that you.
I actually think this is the easiest one, and I'm fine with it not like, no, what the Hartland Selectboard make a decision the first time they hear an idea. That's never gonna happen. But
Ouch!
But no, I think that's a good thing. Gordon called me when I first got on the board, and he was like, "Listen, we do things slowly for a reason. There's a purpose behind it, right?" I think that's a good thing. But just like what we did with case management, maybe it would be good as a board to sort of formally acknowledge that we want to explore something. And to that end, I might offer something like a motion to explore using contingency funding for project-specific funds towards energy mitigation or energy effective mitigation.
Well, did you just make that motion? We can have a second, then we'll have a discussion.
Can we, it's actually a discussion item. This whole thing was just meant to be a general discussion. So it's listed on, so if you want to do what Curtis is requesting, let's put it on as an agenda item.
it doesn't strike me as the best idea that you've ever come up with.
Thank you, Gordon, because I think it's a good idea.
Anyway, I'll tell you what. In the first place, if you save, let's say you save $10,000 on a project, there's not a darn thing you can do with $10,000 to fix energy somewhere.
That was why Phil's idea
I
was
mean, you
great.
might be able to change some light bulbs
That was
or
why
something.
Phil's idea was great, because you put it in a fund.
So you're gonna have to put it in a fund.
Right.
So you put it in a fund, and what that is doing is slowing down the process, which needs to be done sooner, because you're waiting to build up this fund. We need to identify a project and do it,
Oh, sure.
and not wait for money to build up.
Oh, yeah. Great, Gordon. I'm totally on board with what you
So-
just said. I don't think they're mutually exclusive, though.
Okay, so
You
that's,
can still pursue individual projects while letting a fund build up. So, I mean, Mary,
I am listening
as,
to you.
our fearless chairperson, I would be super happy to see this on an upcoming agenda.
Yeah, why can't we do an action?
A sort of
I don't know.
guidance
I don't
action? Is that
understand.
not
I
possible,
don't know
Dave?
why can't we?
There's nothing,
Oh, because it's not,
Because it's on the agenda, is you're simply gonna talk about,
yeah.
you know,
Is that-
Energy Action Network.
Are we
Nowhere,
statutorially limited?
Yes,
You
to
should-
action items,
you
yes.
should somewhat telegraph what your business is gonna be for the night. I'm not saying, you know, I'm just saying to go from her presentation to a policy decision can't be done. I'm just saying, I think that policy item should be, you know, an agenda item. And if you know, would like to see that, then
Yeah, because people want notice so they can weigh in on it.
Well, I will also carefully craft something and think through Gordon's suggestion that maybe it's not my best idea.
And because cynically, here's what I can see people saying, look you're gonna develop a budget for a project, and you're gonna say, you know it's
Over
really
on
gonna.
purpose. Yeah.
Yes, you're gonna say it's like $100,000 when it's really gonna cost 50.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That's a perfectly reasonable.
like,
May I say one more?
Absolutely,
just one more
Phil.
thing, 10 more things. I hope we can generate the same level of discussion and really address what the Energy Committee asked us for. You know, they asked us for guidance for their project work. So I think as an agenda item, you know, we need to make sure that we don't lose sight of that. Get it on.
agreed.
I will prepare though ahead of time for you then.
Okay. Wanna weigh in on this?
got that?
So I think we are done with energy tonight. And we will go on to the Lebanon landfill agreement. And Tom Kennedy of the Mount Escutney Regional Commission is here to discuss it. And because what is your connection? Because Greater Upper Valley Solid Waste District, which he manages, is involved with the Lebanon landfill agreement. Or individual towns are.
yes, and I can give a quick little spiel because it'll just be quick. And just because I've mentioned this maybe 3 times, maybe even 4 to the board, that this Lebanon landfill agreement is coming up. You know, back in June, I think I said it's gonna be coming up really soon, and then Lebanon and the lawyers from Greater Upper Valley Solid Waste District, and maybe another entity or two, kind of needed to hammer out some of the finer details of the agreement. So after a couple months, we've got a final agreement which has been put in front of you. And I'll just simply say that, you know, at the end of the day, regardless of all the details, you know, it comes down to, you know, if we would like our residents to utilize the Lebanon landfill, we need to sign it. If we don't sign it, then that prohibits them from using it. It's all you, Guy.
So just a little bit of background, in 2000, all the towns signed an agreement with the city of Lebanon to use their Lebanon landfill. And that agreement is still in place. it was a very one-sided agreement, especially when it came to liability issues and the like. So we have been working, as Dave just said, we've been working using the GUV attorney and the city of Lebanon to try to hammer out something that is more equitable for all the parties involved. The issue here is if you don't sign, so if you go to page 3 of the agreement under permits required, you have a series of options there. And and one of the options is that you don't participate. If you do not participate in this agreement, then no entity who has a business or a residence in the town of Hartland can use the Lebanon landfill. One of the reasons for this change is the city of Lebanon is going to a barcode system for dealing with people coming to the landfill. So you're going to have a barcode sticker on your windshield, or if you don't want it on your windshield, you can print off a copy, and you are going to load that barcode with money. Just like if you have kids in college, we know to go to the cafeteria, you gotta have the card, and you load it. Then they call you up on Wednesday and say, I don't have any more money. And so that's how they're going to do it. No longer will they allow you to go to La Valleys or to the library or whatever to buy coupons. One of the benefits, they say, of this is we are now going to be able to track how much trash comes into Hartland. Cynically, they're trying to do is, and this is called flow control, is they're trying to be able to capture as much waste as they can for the functioning of their landfill. So here are your 3 options, and if you look at the little boxes, option 1 is that and another portion of this which has been somewhat controversial, is that the city of Lebanon has what they call a welcoming ordinance, and it's in their charter. And what the welcoming ordinance says is any agent or employee, and you could be considered an agent depending on which box you turn, you will not assist ICE in any immigration related activity. The chances of Martin, whoever it might be, it's not very likely. So, but that has been a controversial subject. So, and I'll call them A, B, and C. A is the town of Hartland will allow residents to come to the town hall, and they will assist them in receiving all the things that they need to do. They can collect the money, et cetera, et cetera. Item number 2 is that it's up to each resident who lives in town. They go to the City of Lebanon's website, they download their sticker, they put the money into it, and then the third is you don't want to do anything at all. As a resident of Hartland, I don't think we have that option. And one of the things is for contractors, that's the only place you can bring construction and demolition waste. The town of Hartford no longer accepts it. So there'd be, excuse me, they would be in a difficult situation. So most of the towns, and I've been to probably 4 now, most of the towns are doing option B, which is it's the responsibility of the resident. So as the manager for the solid waste district, we also like option B. We are not trying to make this convenient for the city of Lebanon. Because what happens when they go to the city of Lebanon, we lose our state franchise fee, which is $6, and we lose the GUV surcharge on trash. And this really affects our programs. Over the last couple of years, especially last year with COVID, we lost about $30,000 to $35,000 in leakage to the city of Lebanon. I have tried to negotiate with them to see if we could have a different rate so that the state and the district could get funded, and they don't want to have anything to do with it. So they won't change their rate. and they're subsidizing their bag price. So they only charge $1.50 to go there. And the average price, if you go to, you know, on Saturday to Able Waste, it's $3 or $4. Some places charge $5. So
So they do mention punch cards on here.
you're not, it's not, where do you see that?
It says for waste delivered, it's on page 4. For waste delivered directly by residents of the town, payments will be made using punch cards or by other means established by the city payable at the rate per ton.
So it's not it's a loaded card though, it's gonna be scanned. They're not dealing with punch cards.
So the biggest concern I have when reading through this was section 7, paragraph B, Tom. How does that not prevent the town of Hartland from also getting permits from
Right.
from
So-
people?
So as long as you do not control the trash, such as long as the town doesn't have a transfer station for all the residents and they have a contract, that non-compete doesn't apply to us. It applies to the town of Hartford and the like. So that's how it works. The other thing about all of these things, which is one of the things that we got inserted, is E, which is where there's now with 1 year's notice an opt-out clause. In the past, the contracts were based on the cell life, and they would never tell you when the cell was full. They would extend it or they would do something else. But so that's a much better provision for the parties.
So if I can understand that paragraph, what that means is Hartford cannot enter into this contract with Lebanon, and we could not build a transfer station.
Hartford, if Hartford signs this contract, all of their trash must go to Lebanon. If Hartford decides to not sign this contract, none of their trash can go to Lebanon or any of their businesses go to
So
Lebanon.
we could, I mean, not that anyone has interest in this, but we could build a transfer station. We could accept waste for there, but we would have to take all of that waste to the Lebanon.
Correct. And right now, it's actually, it's the best deal going. It's close. What they charge per ton, I believe, is 85 something. It's cheaper than having it sent all the way to Coventry, Vermont.
So what if, for instance, the energy committee comes back to us and the state comes back to us and they said, well, actually turns out everyone's doing a really bad job with composting, and we need to get composting going. And we in Hartland are like, okay, well, we want to facilitate composting, so we're going to set up a site where our residents can bring their composting. Is that a transfer station? Does that
No,
have to
so
be the
if you look on the
non-compete
definition of acceptable waste, I made sure that organics and recyclables are not part of this. Just so we could have that. I mean, we have a facility in North Hartland already.
You answered most of my question, but I'm still trying to make sure I understand. Do we know today the profile of the Hartland users that use the facility?
We do not.
And then Tom, the last page, signature page, B, it says the signing of this agreement by the town acknowledges the town's responsibility for the town's share of closure costs.
Closure costs are
I know
part.
what closure costs are.
Right, but
But not all of us do.
the
Oh,
close,
sorry.
okay, so when you close a landfill, there's all types, it's very, very expensive to do it. And so what this says is that it's on the bag price. The fees associated with what they charge goes to a contingency fund for closure, similar to your discussion on energy, really is what you're trying to do, is set up a contingency. And so, yes, but that's been building up. And so, but they're just reminding the town, if it exceeds what it is, the town may be liable. And that dates back before the 2000 agreement.
So shouldn't they have the closure costs already in escrow somewhere?
They do. It's just if they find something nasty and they're higher than anticipated. So they're required by New Hampshire law and Vermont law to be working towards a certain amount. And my understanding is they have that in escrow.
Yeah, they must, I
Yeah.
know.
So accepting this agreement doesn't change our relationship with the Hartford,
It does not.
yeah.
Should, no.
It just broadens the options for,
Really, the big, I mean, there's a couple of changes, but the big change is you're not gonna go and get a sticker, I mean, a ticket. It's all digital. It's really the big.
Sarah's got a
Wait,
question.
Can I just start to address Phil's question? So I was actually very oddly, before this draft agenda got circulated to us, contacted by two residents independently about getting access to the Lebanon landfill. And specifically, both of these households said to me, we really need to have a waste disposal option for the lower income people in town. Because these people I know both of them, they drive their waste. When it accumulates to whatever level they're uncomfortable with, they drive it over to Lebanon.
And not to Hartford.
Correct.
Well, we have a lower income, Ava Waste is not expensive.
No, but this is even much cheaper, like more than half.
Well, you gotta get it there too.
Yeah.
So, okay, Sarah.
So anyway, I would argue that because at 56 cents a mile, a round trip.
Everyone
and
has
like,
different depreciation
You know, and then you look
schedules,
at the
but-
carbon footprint of all that.
Yeah.
It's a fairly expensive option.
Yeah, Sarah.
Yeah, may I ask a question? Curtis said something related to this, but I didn't quite hear the entire conversation. You're talking about a landfill in New Hampshire. So my question is, does New Hampshire have laws like Vermont to divert foodstuffs from trash?
They don't have what we have here.
But they do have a diversion program and they have a requirement. My only pet peeve about the city of Lebanon, and if you read, there was an article recently in the Valley News about organics and organic disposal. And they basically said they don't really have to be very fussy in their composting thing because all they're doing is using it as daily cover on the top of the landfill. So they take, so it's really, really dirty organics. You know, there's no attempt whatsoever.
Yeah, so anybody who brings food scraps there, you're just.
It's not getting,
It's just
it's not getting
sprinkled on top
compost.
of
Yeah.
trash.
It's being thrown in a pile and then it gets thrown, so.
So the food scrap organics are not put in the landfill, is that what you're saying?
They are what they call used as daily cover. Can I turn my head?
Yeah, of course.
And so, no, that's right, I can turn my back. So what they basically do is they use it as a soil amendment, so then they put grass.
Well, in many ways, then there's enough oxygen that it probably decomposes completely as opposed to.
That, yes, but the problem is it's full of plastic bags, straws, et cetera, it's very contaminated. Where in Vermont, we work really hard to have people self-police to try to give us the cleanest product that we can.
Plus, is that where food, which has so much energy that's gone into it, should that go into a landfill, whether it's in the landfill or on the landfill, it should be going back into our soil?
If it goes into the landfill, it will release methane.
I know.
Because it's anaerobic.
Right.
Yes.
If it's
I know.
on the surface, it would probably be broken down aerobically by.
But it's not a good
And then it'll
use.
just release CO2 and water.
It's still not a good
But,
use.
I have a
I mean,
question.
I just think, if you look at that graph of where greenhouse gas is coming from, that top line is waste management. And
I know, it is very small.
It's very small, but it is still,
It's still there, yes. Gordon.
Tom.
Yes.
Tom, the section about the town's responsibility, number 3 there. I don't
What
understand-
page you on, Gordon, please?
On 6, page 6. Town's responsibility, it says by no later than March 2 of each year, the town shall provide this to the
Yeah.
city, a summary of the tonnage of solid waste which was recycled. I think we could do that. But how could you report on reused, composted, or source reduced in the previous calendar year?
Someone has to walk around and count
So-
3 piles.
We have fabulous people who work for the two solid waste districts, Mary O'Brien and Ham Gillett. And what we've done is we have what we've come out diversion rates, so which is a percentage. You don't know this, we've been doing this for years to
Okay,
meet
so
the
these
requirements. So it's just a percentage that we say is diverted. Realistically, it's a number sort of similar to when Sarah was talking earlier about energy numbers. It's really hard sometimes. They get real squishy really, really quick, depending on who you're talking to.
Okay,
And this
got
is very similar. It has placated them for a decade. We don't have to worry. We care more about here in Vermont. We try to do it seriously. So that's what we've been doing.
They should be giving us a report of the solid waste that
So
we.
they will be giving us a report on the
Okay.
amount of solid waste that has been generated in Hartland by those that use the landfill.
Okay.
But they're not gonna give us a report on recyclables, which is too bad.
Phil.
Yes, Phil.
Tom, I just wanted to clarify, you were asking the select board to sign or not sign this document. And then the only variable within the document is the permit required option. So there's
Correct.
two decisions tonight. Should we be approving this or accepting this? The A, that's the first one, and then the second is the permit.
Right, so if you do A, then you're going to assign a member in your town hall to assist residents.
Right.
And you also agree to do the training they have for their welcoming ordinance.
Sure. And
So you'll do that.
You're suggesting that
It-
these are not lettered or numbered, but the second or
Box
B.
2, which is you want to use it, you go online,
Yeah.
you go
Right.
do it.
So it's very similar to, today I was using my Easy Pass, which I
Yeah.
only use every once in a while, and there's a balance on that.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't think too much about
Yeah.
it. Okay.
I'll just simply reiterate Greater Upper Valley's stance as far as number 2, that we sign the agreement, but, that the resident takes care of the permitting themselves, I think that's my recommendation as well.
Well, can I make a motion?
Aye,
Make a
please.
motion that we accept the municipal solid waste agreement between the city of Lebanon as presented. There's no date on this, is there?
I think we date it today.
We
We
did.
sign it.
Okay. And that we choose the permit required to be the second option.
Which is, maybe you could put that in, Martha?
To allow its residents to obtain individual permits directly from the city.
Through an online portal. I mean, you're right, Phil, people are doing Easy Pass now. They're not going to some municipal official and asking for help. They're just, right?
Correct, and there's a
Yeah,
balance that's
so-
kept on it automatically.
Yeah, I'm
agree.
saying they don't come into their town hall and say, hey, I need help with
No,
this.
I don't
Yeah.
go to the state of Vermont for my music class.
Yeah.
I would go somewhere else.
Yeah. So, I don't think we really have a choice about whether to sign this or not. Yeah, anybody want to second it?
I will.
Okay, Gordon, second it. Any more discussion? Can we beat this to death? Any more? No? Okay. Motion passed, I believe. Everybody scored. Okay.
Can I just bring up one other thing? And this is under the category of unpleasant.
No.
I hate to, I'm doing it tomorrow unless you folks really. So if you remember a number of months ago, there was some stuff on the listserv about what's going on down on the Ottaquechee, right past a covered bridge. There's access into the river there. Over the years, we've had problems with furniture being disposed of down there, and then there were people saying they're going down there and they're finding drug paraphernalia. I got a call from the constable saying they really want to restrict the access down there. I then also got some angry phone calls about doing that. A backhoe is coming tomorrow to set bollards across that entrance, and I'm probably gonna put up 2 gates I need to leave it wide enough, so I stopped in and already talked to the Meachams about it. They need it wide enough so they can get their forage equipment down in there. I'm going to try to do is on either side of the bollards is basically create almost like a portage type of thing where people can still walk down the road into it, and they could carry a canoe or their thing. This is not going to be pleasant. I bet the person who's going to be running the backhoe, how long I think this is going to last. I think someone's going to break it.
Break the bollard?
They're gonna go through the gates, I'm afraid, I think. So unless I hear otherwise, from the town, we're gonna go forward with this, and then tomorrow night, I'm gonna put something on the listserv saying it is closed. It's still open, people can still use it to go fishing, they wanna go kayaking or whatever, but I know there are people down there that I think bring boats down there. I'm not that familiar with it, but it sounds like there's motorized stuff that goes down there. I also thought about having it, I don't know if you're familiar, is having it lower down in the thing, but again, it will then be hidden and we're gonna have the same problems with trash. And so it's gonna be right up on the road. I'll try to call Bill maybe tomorrow, and if he wanted to look at it, but that's the plan. I wish I didn't have to do it.
Is there a parking space up on the
Parking is
road?
probably, and this is why I gotta talk to the town, parking is probably gonna be an issue. They're probably gonna have to park up closer to where Curtis lives, or something like that. Or down towards like Gary's or something. There's no parking right there unless we can sort of clear stuff out a little bit.
There's one parking spot. There's a little tiny pull off in between the two bridges, where there's a access point to the second dam on that side. There's a little tiny pull out and cars parked there, but
Well, the point is, that's not the only access to the water.
well, it is there.
It is for
Hartland.
right, but for the
It
Ottaquechee,
is.
and I guess it's noted for its walleye fishing, and I'm not a,
putting in a canoe there, not fishing.
yeah, so.
Um,
But my point is that there's gonna be it's gonna generate some unhappiness. I really hate doing this, but
Did you resolve it with the Cruder Marshes, Dave? What's gonna happen down on that side?
I told her we'd keep an eye on it.
So the concern that the Cruder Marshes had is that people are gonna try to be accessing the river from there. It's published in books like Kayaking Vermont that there's a spot you can put in your kayak. There's a put in there. This is a very commonly known thing. And so people are gonna go down Everts. They're gonna be like, oh, there's a put in somewhere here. I'm lost. I don't know where I'm going. They're gonna go down Everts. Everts dead ends into private property. And right before the train tracks is the Cruder Marshes house. And I think they're concerned about people turning around in their driveway. So there's maybe if it's an issue, and I'll keep an eye on it too, Dave. If I see a bunch of people going down there with boats, I'll let you know, but might even put like a no river access sign somewhere on the road at some point in time. Yeah. Why people gotta dump couches by rivers, I don't understand.
yeah, I mean, they've been so heavy, we've had to ask the town on a number of occasions to go down there with their equipment, pick the stuff up.
Like, this isn't gonna stop people from shooting heroin up down there, right?
No,
Okay,
no.
people will still shoot heroin up down there. I see people walk down there, I'm like, okay, I know what your afternoon spent doing, but couches, are you serious?
Dumping's kind of an issue for us there and several other places.
Yeah, Martinsville, does the same sort of thing.
So,
Well, thanks for that uplifting news.
just wanted to let you know, misery loves company.
So, we are done?
We
Town
okay?
meeting?
So that's what's gonna happen.
Great.
Thank you for coming in.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks.
Am I mailing it into Lebanon? Am I sending it to Lebanon or to you guys?
If you could email it to me and to Mark, that'd be good.
Tom,
Thank you.
I just want you to know that our esteemed town manager was really needling you in your absence.
Earlier,
Yes.
he could have been at my house helping me find the broken water line in my field.
No, he was saying that you were napping.
Yeah.
Do you feel the bus tracks?
Oh, wait. Can I say, I'm in here, I'd like to need help. Thank you, have a good night.
You know, I have a little bit of experience in counseling, if you'd like to.
Tom,
Yeah.
okay, let's go back to the agenda. Fiscal year 22 budget update.
We're waiting for Martin now.
So once again, there, Mr. Kennedy is interrupting things. Damn guy, he thinks it's social hour, he's a little confused between here and work.
Keep flying. Martin, you are up, please.
Good evening. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you. Good night, Carl.
So we're in the first month of our fiscal year at 8%. As you can see, we are a touch over 8% on page 2. Under assessments, we have dues and first payments that are due the 1st of July, the bond payment to the Windsor tax, VLCT's dues, fire truck payment. So that's what's thrown us over. When we get to the end of the fiscal year, we will be right on track on all those line items. Otherwise, in the general fund, we're pretty much right on track. The highway department,
What page are you on?
top of page 2, upper top of page 2, that says assessments. That is over budget only because we have dues and payments due the beginning of the year.
We got revenues first, so that's why we're confused about the page.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We're
I-
on expenses, right?
Yes, I can go to revenues if you prefer.
No, either way.
Okay, sorry about that. Under the assessments, as you can see, we had dues and county tax bond is due by July 1st. The rec department is slightly elevated. The rec department will probably be over budget next month because their summer camp expenses are in this fiscal year, and a lot of the summer camp revenues are in the previous fiscal year because people pay for summer camp in May and June, and the expenses hit in July and August. So that will be a little change in the rec department. Otherwise, the general fund is right on track at this point. The highway department, pretty much the same. They're in budget at this point. As a whole, you can see they're at 2.35%, so they're under the 8%. But as the summer goes on, we will hope we don't have the same problems we had last year with the sinkhole and Clay Hill Road. Questions on the expenses? Revenues, as you can see, I moved the highway fund a little early, so that's why there's a negative under the current taxes. That caught up very quickly in the month of August. The revenues otherwise were at 4.6%, so we're a little bit under the 8%, but they will catch up as we move through the year. And the rec department at 4%. Like I said, most of their summer income comes in May and June of the previous fiscal year. The highway department's revenues, we've gotten one state payment so far for the first quarter of the new fiscal year. And I've booked the other money that is due from the state as a receivable.
Where was that other, when you said you booked it as?
As a receivable. So they owe us 100, we budgeted 157,000, I believe. They paid us 42,000 already.
have a question, and maybe you already answered that and I didn't hear it. Highway grants and aid project budgeted 15,000 and we haven't gotten it. What's that?
Project hasn't been done yet. So it's a reimbursable grant, so you gotta spend it first before it comes in.
Oh, I see, okay.
I would be hoping that at some point in like October, November, that'll be coming in.
I see, okay. You have to show them the invoices and.
Yep, so yeah, you spend it and then you send them the invoices, you request reimbursement essentially.
That's the only thing I highlighted. Does anybody have any questions? Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
So I just want to just add on a little bit of what Martin just said. So every budget is kind of its own little story. Hopefully, as Martin said, we stay on course with this and we don't have anything that we had crop up last summer. That certainly was our story that carried throughout the year. But just know that last year there were some places in the budget that we had money, you know, as a just in case. We have to do that, like the $25,000 for Fork Brook Road and a couple other places. We don't have that this year, so the budget is fairly tight. I can tell you a couple places that we're going to run short, probably right off the bat. Our IT expenses are up above what they were prior, will continue to be until we make those adjustments, which won't be until next fiscal year. So we're already going to run into the hole on that.
Is that purchases of hardware for employees, or is it really the service itself?
So our monthly IT expenses, so we have our hardware expenses for the new guy. And in order to do the mapping that we want to be, this is probably going to be a little bit over budget. But on the monthly aspect of this, just with the use of the teams and, you know, other things, that we're just utilizing IT more. You know, it's just becoming a more ingrained way of doing things. I think the pandemic has shown that. So obviously, the more little gizmos that we utilize, the more, you know, it does cost us. But I expect that will continue to creep up as we utilize technology a little bit. Just a couple other things. Old Home Day, we got really excited because we had already prepaid for the fireworks, and you know, I got carried away with the excitement. But we do need to purchase that this year. We pre-purchase, even though it is a July 1st event, which is in the next fiscal year. We do purchase that around October, November, or at least we give them a down payment. So that will be above and beyond. And we've got a couple of things coming in late that I'm not sure is going to make it to last year's budget. Vermont State Police, we're still waiting on 2 invoices that they owe us. So whether that makes it in or whether we've got to put it into this fiscal year will remain to be seen. However, there are places that we may underspend. Legal expenses is one of them. Interestingly enough, Vermont State Police is also one of them, so that might kind of come out in the wash. And capital improvements, it remains to be seen. Obviously, we talked about the steps not being able to get done, leaves a little bit of space to do some LED work. However, I was supposed to, at least in my mind, be kind of looking towards the floors over the activity center. And I'm not close to that, and with the demand of contractors these days, I'm a little concerned as to whether we'll fit that in this fiscal year. So may allow us to do other things that just happen to materialize and are a little bit easier to pull off. You know, we may get it done. I don't want to say that we won't. Or it'll leave a little bit of space for us that we've underspent. So there's places for us to go over, a little bit of spot for us to go under. But I just wanted to kind of point that out since we just rounded out the first month.
Thanks, Dave. Anybody have questions for Dave?
On the budget here.
Yep. the budget update. And probably we can then move on to the manager's notes.
COVID-19 continues to be a real thorn. Just numbers are hovering over 100 at this point. I'm
Wait, what numbers are over 100
COVID-19
cases?
cases are over 100 at this point.
In the state?
What's that?
In the state?
In the state.
Yeah.
Yep. However, it's still over 100. We topped out at, the very worst of it at like 250. But certainly when we get into anything over 100, essentially for Vermont, anything over 60, kind of raises my eyebrows. So,
That is per day?
yep. Yep, shot up to 140 or something there for a day last week or over the weekend. It was down to 114 or 107.
Does this count any positive tests?
Those are all positive tests. I
No,
understand.
but counts all positive tests, is what I'm trying to say.
In the state of Vermont, correct.
Whether people are sick or not.
Whether they're showing symptoms, correct.
Yeah.
Yep. So, two things on that note. I am waiting to see, there is a threshold where the CDC guidance comes into play, and the CDC guidance recommends the face masking. If we hit that, I expect that we'll go there as a town. We'll follow that. We'll call it a request. We'll follow that guidance. So keep your eyes open. That may affect select board meetings if we want to wear masks or not. Windsor is still pretty quiet, actually somewhat quiet, but north and south of us are not. So we'll continue to see. Also, I'm thinking very strongly that we were looking at opening the buildings to the public after Labor Day. I'm now thinking that we push that off to Columbus Day anyways. There's some talk out there that, this variant will fizzle out as fast as it came, and therefore come mid-October, we should be back to some normalcy. I personally think as we get into the cooler weather, it's just going to continue to accelerate. So how that goes, I don't know, but those two things I'm keeping an eye on. And that would really affect, any other person or a group that wants to utilize Damon Hall, whether that be for meetings or the bone builders or the karate folks over at the rec center. We'll wait and see.
So the bone builders still aren't?
Nope.
Are they meeting outside?
They are, I understand. Eileen, last I spoke to Eileen, she indicated that they were doing this, Sarah Bruce might know, doing this, I think at somebody's house or at some place.
I was wondering about our tent, if we could have our tent.
We have a tent.
I know, but
Yep.
leave it up.
It'll stay up until, through
it is-
early
it is-
fall.
I
It's
didn't
up.
know. It is up, okay.
Yep.
So they could meet under that. That would be okay with me.
I am still open to outdoor activity, and I've spoken to Highly. So there is an exercise group that is utilizing Foster Meadow Fields. I have spoken to Eileen, but she seems content on the location that they're at. But I must hear from her once a week. I'm getting nervous. I'm watching the governor. What are you doing? And my answer is kind of we're keeping an eye on it. But I think that we're going to need to. I think we're going to have to continue to hit the pause. I'm just not. Needs to go the other way again, and I'm not sure with fall coming that's going to be the case. But we'll wait and see. Three Corners intersection, Dan Peck had to put our meeting off. However, the borings that I've been talking about for the Three Corners intersection, they've done. They did not find any ledge, so that's a good sign. So we continue to inch forward.
Wait, no ledge?
No ledge.
How about concrete?
We know that there's concrete
Oh,
there.
you
Yep.
do know that?
Yep.
Okay.
Underneath, it's underneath Route 5. Pavement anyways. Yeah.
Okay.
I can remember.
You can.
So, I guess what I'll spend, a little bit of time on, and we're getting a little bit late, I need to move on, for my daughter's sake. I need to get back by 8:30, but,
You can do it.
I do want to spend a little bit of time on this one. So Bill Barrows gave his notice. I think that this is important because what we're seeing as a trend across the state, or at a very minimum, the region, we're 2 guys down. Norwich does not have their DPW manager. Woodstock does not have theirs. Hartford's missing 3 guys. Take your pick with any town. Bridgewater's looking for 2. It's just tough to find somebody to do this work at this point in time. So there's really 2 concerns. One is just to fill the everyday position with somebody, and the demand is low. As I put in my town manager update, I think there's going to be an inflationary reaction to that in the trade. I also don't see anybody new coming into this. We were lucky, even though Travis moved on over to D&D. We had Travis and Zach, both young, eager to do this. However, they're not banging down our door. So I think that's a telling sign. And then with Bill's position in and of itself, there's some complexity there that I think I'm going to, I'm looking at very seriously. There's really it's just a different world today. What highway foreman did 25 years ago is not what the head of the department needs to do today for that department. There needs to be the long-term planning. There needs to be, meetings with subcontractors. There's meetings with folks like with Two Rivers about inventories and priorities. There is mapping that we hope to do with Sean, who's in another item here. There's grant work. It's really an office, it's kind of an elevated office position. And these guys traditionally are used to, dumping hard pack and trenching and things like that. So we gave Bill an extra guy to get, free up time for him. However, that jump is still pretty hard. You got computers, computer software. So I think that going forward, when I look for this position, it's going to be more orientated towards the administrative side, even an engineering type background, something that can provide that support. Still look to somebody to maybe, lead the staff itself, kind of like an everyday supervisor type, like we've always had. And these 2 folks will need to work together. I'm not sure
Which 2 folks?
the person that is going to be like a supervisor of the actual, operations on a daily basis, the actual, so there'll be, so right now with Bill, we had 6. We hired an extra guy. We always had 5. So envision having that same makeup, having the 5 guys, having maybe 1 that's responsible for making sure the guy in the backhoe is actually going to the proper street he should be going to. And then more of an administrative manager type that is going to be, picking up all these other things that we had hoped Bill to do. However, he's going to be, focused on, literally, things that a guy that's out digging a ditch isn't going to have, he's not going to be able to meet with, the subcontractor that's going to be digging a ditch. Back when we had problems with Martinsville Road and Clay Hill Road, that was almost a constant, full-time job for Bill and myself, trying to track down, putting RFPs out, who's going to do the work, meeting with Chris Bumps from the state of Vermont, all stuff that is non-everyday activity. I was looking to give away and to delegate that Bob was doing before. So I think that, basically just looking at that and giving the new position to essentially someone with a different talent set.
So Dave,
Not-
I understand what you're saying.
Yep.
And I also understand that it reflects both the state environmental laws and the state guidelines and best practices and the complexity of contractors and insurance. But it sounds like we would have to change both the job description as well as the salary requirements for the hypothetical position you're talking about today.
Yep. So the salary, obviously the salary, you know, would be maybe a little bit more. You know, I think that we would need to make up, you know, obviously, the other position, you know, the everyday supervisory position would be less. I think you end up with, we're still a little bit more than where we were. So I think we've got maybe about 15 grand that we would, you know,
Right.
be about over.
The everyday supervisor would still be an hourly paid employee, and the supervisor would obviously remain an exempt.
Yeah, I think so. I haven't fleshed out all the things, but I spent some time speaking with a couple people on this and some other towns that have dabbled in, you know, a makeup such as this. And it seems to work pretty good, particularly these days. You know, again, 25 years ago, I think it was just a different, you know, a different time. So I know that one of the, actually in both Norwich and Woodstock, there was a difficulty, particularly Woodstock, making that jump. Whereas you had a town manager leave, who's really doing a lot of that, and a new one come in that was like, you know, that's your position. And, you know, I think that the new person, or not the new person, the person that was there had difficulties juggling the two. It's a tough, it's tough,
So
so.
I'm a little confused.
Yep.
So we've lost one regular road crew person.
Yep.
And now we've lost the head of the road crew.
Yep.
And what you're proposing is to get a new head of the road crew and then another administrative type person? Is that,
So we would fill the gap in the road crew. You know, I don't really know, you know, maybe it's somebody new that dabbles with, you know, the other four answer directly to, or it's somebody that's existing. You know, I haven't decided that. So you still end up with 5. We added 1 to make Bill essentially the position I'm trying to fill as a man. Let me put the difference between the two, one being a desk person and one being an operations person. So,
did you say test?
desk.
Oh, desk.
So you think of it this way, you got a desk position and operations. We gave Bill somebody to give him time to essentially be the desk person. At this point, we fill the ranks, which would be 5, and we make the desk person a new person, but it's probably not somebody that we employ now. It'd be somebody different with a different background, perhaps.
And the desk person would also have the skills to fill in should vacations come around.
I don't think so.
Ooh,
I don't think you're gonna find it.
yeah.
I think this person could be a woman. The
I
desk
agree.
person.
I mean, I think
So,
the
yeah,
other person could be a woman as well.
let me just say,
How often are shovels actually used these days?
let me just say that if someone comes down the pike and is an engineer or a very strong engineering background, and they happen to be able to drive an excavator and a dump truck, well then, obviously he is at the head of the pack.
That person is at the head of it.
I am not going to limit myself that this person has to.
I'm getting to be like Martha now. I'm confused. So, you're saying a desk person and an operations person. Can we use the word planner? Is the best person the planner kind of?
No, we already got a planner. Sean's our planner.
Dave?
He would do your, think of it as a general contractor.
As a scheduling, we would sort of say, Martha, you go here today, courtesy go there today.
No, that's not okay.
That would be the other
That's
guy.
the other guy. That's what I'm trying to establish. So would the other guy have
So it'd be like
the
the,
ability
yeah.
to also?
don't think of like a general contractor who goes out and pulls together the jobs, pulls together materials, and turns around to his head foreman and says, you know, we gotta be over in, you know, Four Corners by Tuesday. And the foreman gets you over to Four Corners on Tuesday.
So the head foreman, scheduler, not the P guy, not the planner, the desk guy, are we losing an operational person if we create this scenario?
Yeah, a little bit. Bill, obviously in a snowstorm, was out plowing or utilizing the bucket. Yep.
Right, but we're talking about, okay.
But we also had 5 to begin with. So, you know, obviously, being able to swing and do both is a benefit. However, I'm not entirely sure for the job itself, the person that can plow is the best person to be doing the other stuff.
Let's talk about this at another meeting. I mean, we need to move on. He's gotta get out of here.
Bottom line is if I hire an actual manager type, obviously if he can plow, then he's our guy.
I'm not expecting the manager type to.
If he, you know, if he is more suitable to be able to conquer our, you know, planning terms, our paving, you know, and dealing with, you know, Pike and, you know, all our other headaches, then we've solved the majority of, you know, what's going wrong here.
And if we look to the pool of candidates to the 51% of the population, then we just have widened the scope.
More than doubled it.
Yes.
More
So-
than doubled.
My apologies for the use of the word crewman.
I didn't see it, I didn't see it.
That was just,
Gordon saw it.
just crew doesn't seem to work, so crewman, and on it went.
Remember.
On I went, I didn't think twice.
It's all right.
But I will just say that we have had females respond to our advertisements. So we are open to male or female.
That's bad. Okay.
So with every 2 steps backwards, there is a step forward, and that is on the ordinance administration position. We did hire Sean McGranigan, I think an excellent candidate, a newly graduated graduate student from the University of Buffalo in urban planning, has a very strong background in GIS mapping, which is a benefit. Now, the next hardest thing to do is to get him here and find him a place to stay, is a challenge.
Does he have a family, or is he one person looking for?
He is a one person looking for a place.
He has been hired,
Yes.
formally hired?
Yep.
Okay, so
But
we
he-
can talk about things like that.
Right, but he needs a place to live, and as we all know, they're extremely hard to come by.
But you'd like him to start in September.
If we can get him here, that would be a goal. That would be ideal.
Are we talking like home share you want? Need him to start by September?
Yes, he's gonna move in with you.
When is he available to start?
I have told him that the first priority is for him to find a place, and that, you know, it's not contingent on that he has to be here on Labor Day, but I've given him some dates that he needs to touch base with me on, and that he should find a place and get settled before, you know, before he tries to live in his car and be here for Labor Day. So, Kevin O'Toole did come and do title search, so that continues to inch forward. ARPA, we have received our half of our money. County money is supposed to come.
And how much is that half?
Of the first amount, about 150 grand. I don't have an exact dollar amount, but it's close to a little over 150 grand. I'm not entirely sure whether the county money is coming in a half or full, but we're supposed to receive it within the next month. As we talked about, Curtis, with the efficiency and stuff, some of the finer details we are still waiting on. And lastly, just for good measure, long-term projects that we're looking at still remains to be Queechee Road, the Jennyville Road culvert, ADA access to the rec center, which we're slowly starting to move forward on, we hope. Drainage at both the rec center and Damon Hall. Activity center, roof and floors, in the library HVAC system, as well as the North Hartland School. I would like to be able to shoehorn the Jennyville Road culvert into the ADA funding. And I think that would be excellent if we could knock that off.
Wait, say that again? You'd like to shoehorn the Jennyville culvert?
Into ARPA, not
Oh,
ADA.
oh, okay, ARPA.
Did I say ADA?
Yes,
It's fine, I heard it.
If I had that sandwich, Mary,
I told you.
wouldn't have gone. I made a few
told you.
slips tonight, so.
Thank you very much,
That's it.
Dave. I'm sure no one has questions.
I would offer a motion for adjournment.
Okay, excellent. And, yeah, I think we need a second.
Boy, if I need to really avoid a serious issue that you guys need to act on, I know who I'm bringing to speak first. Sarah and Tom, and then I'm gonna hit you with the big vote, just to make sure you guys are toast.
Wait, what'd you hit us with? Did you sneak in something I didn't even notice?
We're still recording?
You have to officially adjourn.
Yes, we did. He made the motion, I seconded it.
You guys are gonna vote on it?
You know what? I don't actually think you need a second or a vote for adjournment.
Wow.
Yeah.